My aunt killed my parents for money and had me forcibly medicated to keep me quiet, so I gathered evidence until she was arrested. Now she's out of prison and wants access to her share of my trust fund. My uncles always told me to never let success get your head, and my mom and dad took that to heart. My dad had started a small tech company in our garage that blew up, making our whole family rich almost overnight, but you would never know it by looking at us. My parents were terrified I'd grow up to be one of those kids who thinks money is a personality, so they kept things simple. All my clothes came from thrift stores or discount shops, and I was never allowed to have the newest phone or tablet. We even had an old hit-up car that made weird noises. Our cat, Whiskers, ate the cheapest food from the grocery store. For a long time, I really hated it. I would secretly watch those holiday gift videos online where girls showed off piles of costly presents, and I wished so badly that I could do that too. At school, I'd see other girls wearing nothing but designer clothes and carrying fancy bags, and the jealousy felt like a punch in my stomach. But everything changed when I turned 16. I was sitting in the back of my math class when my friend Sarah walked in wearing a cute but clearly secondhand jacket. This really rich girl named Madison, who sat in the front, turned to her friend and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "If my family couldn't buy me new clothes, I would literally call myself." They both burst out laughing like it was the most hilarious joke in the world. In that moment, I finally understood what my parents were trying to protect me from, and I felt grateful. I guess they noticed I stopped complaining about money because they started to loosen up a little. It wasn't anything crazy, but they shocked me with an extra vacation that year. That's when we made plans to go visit my mom's sister Claire. She was the total opposite of my parents. She always smelled like a cloud of costly perfume, wore real diamond jewelry that sparkled when she moved, and drove a bright red sports car that looked like it belonged in a movie. We hadn't seen her much, and she insisted that we all go out on her boat for the day. I remember feeling so weird and out of place standing on the dock. Her boat was huge, like a small yacht, with shiny white floors and leather seats. Claire came out to greet us wearing a designer bathing suit and costly sandals that maybe cost more than our car. Meanwhile, my family and I were standing there in our old faded swimsuits from Target. Around 4 in the afternoon, the weather turned bad out of nowhere. Dark clouds rolled in, and the captain started turning the boat back to shore. The waves got really big and choppy, and I got super seasick, so I went down to one of the bedrooms below deck to lie down. When we finally got back to the dock, I ran up to find my parents, ready to laugh with them about the crazy storm, but I couldn't see them anywhere. Claire was standing there with this fake, sad look on her face, dabbing at her eyes with a cloth even though she wasn't crying at all. "They're gone," she said, her voice loud and dramatic. I felt like all the air was sucked out of my lungs. The waves got so bad they fell off the boat, and nobody noticed until it was too late. I just collapsed right there on the dock. Claire waved someone over to help me into her car, and her driver took me to her huge, empty house. I tried to speak, but no words would come out. For the next few days, I just stayed in bed, feeling numb. Back then, I was just a kid, and I believed she was doing everything she could to find my parents. After 3 days, she told me they did. She said their bodies looked so bad I could barely tell it was them, but it was enough for a funeral. I wanted to wear a simple blue dress my mom had bought me for my birthday because it still smelled like her. But when I went to my closet, all my old clothes were gone. "You're a wealthy girl now, and you need to dress like it," Claire said in a cold, mean voice. She handed me a heavy, sparkly black dress that felt all wrong. The only thing I had left of my parents was our cat, Whiskers. Every night when I would start to cry, he would jump onto my bed and start purring, rubbing his head against my cheek. It felt like he was the only one who understood. He was the only one I felt secure being sad around. Because whenever Claire saw me looking even a little bit upset, she would hand me a present. Each gift was more costly than the last, a costly purse, the newest phone, fancy headphones. She spent so much money trying to buy my happiness that I started to feel guilty for ever showing my grief around her. That's how Whiskers became my everything. Every night I'd sit in my new fancy white bed, feeling fully empty inside, and Whiskers would curl up on my lap and rub his face on mine until I almost smiled. The way his green eyes looked at me, begging me to play with him, was the only thing that could get me out of bed on the weekends. But I'm a really light sleeper, so every single night, right before I fell asleep, I gently put him outside my room and closed the door. It was around noon on a Sunday when I went looking for him. I had spent the whole morning just scrolling on my phone and crying, but he was nowhere to be found. Then Claire walked into the living room holding a pet carrier. My heart sank when I saw that inside it wasn't Whiskers. It was a tiny white dog with a pink bow. "I got rid of that ugly cat that was always bothering you," she said with a smile. "This is Princess." I swear I thought she was playing some kind of sick joke, but then she opened the carrier and tried to force me to pet the dog. I ran back up to my room without saying a word. I just stared at all the costly, useless stuff in my room, trying to think of one single reason not to just end everything. That's when I heard Claire talking on the phone downstairs. She was speaking louder than usual, and I was curious. I opened my door just a crack to listen in. "Of course I had to get rid of them," she said, her voice full of confidence. "The way they were raising her was mainly child abuse. No kid should have to live like they're poor." My whole body went cold. It was all on purpose. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Claire's voice carried clearly through the house as she continued her phone conversation. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to control my breathing. "The sedatives in their wine worked perfectly," Claire said, and I had to cover my mouth to stop from gasping. Marcus said they never even realized what was happening before they went overboard. My legs turned to jelly. I slid down the wall, still listening as Claire laughed at something the person on the other end said. The floor felt cold against my bare feet, and I realized my phone was dead in my pocket. I'd forgotten to charge it again. "Sweetie, is that you?" Claire's voice suddenly called out, much closer now. I scrambled up and rushed to the bathroom, flushing the toilet and running the water to make it seem like I'd been in there the whole time. When I opened the door, Claire stood in the hallway, her phone nowhere in sight. "Dinner's ready," she said, studying my face. Her eyes darted to the bathroom door, checking if it had been fully closed. I followed her to the dining room, where she'd set out an elaborate meal. My stomach churned as she placed a plate in front of me. She sat down across from me and started cutting her steak. "I have some news," Claire said, not looking up from her food. "I've already filed for temporary guardianship with family court. The emergency hearing is in 3 days. It's just standard procedure for orphaned minors." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out official court documents. The summons was dated the day after my parents died. She'd been planning this from the beginning. I pushed my food around my plate, unable to eat. "I need to call my parents' lawyer." "Of course, sweetie. Though I should mention he's on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I already checked." Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. I excused myself and ran next door to the Johnson's house. Mrs. Johnson answered the door in her bathrobe, looking surprised to see me. "Please, I need help," I started, but Claire appeared behind me before I could explain. "I'm so sorry to bother you," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "She's in shock and saying horrible things about everyone. The grief counselor warned me this might happen." Mrs. Johnson's expression shifted from concern to pity. She patted my shoulder awkwardly while Claire gently led me back home. Once in my room, I locked the door and opened my laptop. My fingers shook as I typed an email to my parents' lawyer, but an auto reply popped up immediately confirming he was out of office for 2 weeks. I tried calling his emergency number, but it went straight to voicemail. A gentle knock came at my door. "Sweetie, I'm leaving your mother's sleeping pills outside your door in case you need help resting. The doctor said you should take 2 if you're having trouble." I waited until her footsteps faded before opening the door. A prescription bottle sat on the floor. The label had my mother's name, but something seemed off. I grabbed my laptop and googled the medication name. My blood ran cold. These weren't sleeping pills at all. They were antipsychotics that caused memory issues and confusion. The prescription date was 2 months before my parents died. At 2 a.m., I carefully opened my window and climbed out. The Johnsons had a landline I could use to call for help, but as I crept across their lawn, I spotted Claire's red sports car parked in their driveway. She was still there, probably spinning more lies about my mental state. I climbed back through my window and barely slept. The next morning, Claire served me breakfast with her usual fake smile. "I've scheduled some grief counseling appointments for you," she said, pouring orange juice. "It's required for the guardianship proceedings. Dr. Brennan comes highly recommended." The doorbell rang, interrupting her. I jumped up, hoping it might be help, but Claire got there first. Through the window, I saw Officer Davis standing on the porch. My heart leaped. My online police tip must have worked. "I'm here following up on a concerning report," Officer Davis said. Claire's face transformed into a mask of concern. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I've been so worried about my niece." She pulled out a folder thick with documents, death certificates, guardianship papers, medical records. She's been saying terrible things since her parents' accident. The trauma has been overwhelming. While Claire distracted the officer with her performance, I slipped into her home office. My mom's daily planner sat on the desk. I flipped through it frantically and found an entry from the week before they died. "P.I. investigating C's finances. Meeting Tuesday. They died on Monday. There you are. Claire's voice made me jump. Officer Davis was gone. Time for your counseling appointment. Dr. Brennan specializes in trauma-induced paranoia. At Dr. Brennan's office, I noticed him writing notes before I even sat down. Over his shoulder, I could read exhibits paranoid ideation regarding Guardian, already written on his pad. I stayed completely silent for the entire session, but that didn't stop him from filling pages with observations. Selective mutism and oppositional behavior jumped out at me from his notes. When we left, Claire tucked a receipt into her purse. She'd paid for 10 sessions in advance. Our next stop was the grocery store. While Claire examined organic vegetables, I scribbled, "Help." She called my parents on a piece of paper and tried to slip it to the cashier. Claire's hand shot out and grabbed it. "I'm so sorry," she told the confused cashier. "Grief makes children do strange things." She crumpled the note and steered me out of the store. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma asking if she could visit. Before I could respond, Claire plucked the phone from my hands. "Let me handle this," she said, typing rapidly. "You need to focus on healing, not social visits." The guardianship hearing arrived faster than I expected. I sat in the courtroom, watching Claire present herself as the perfect concerned aunt. When the judge finally asked me to speak, I told him about the phone call I'd overheard. "She was talking about sedatives and wine," I said desperately. She admitted to killing them. The judge's expression remained neutral. "Do you have any evidence of this conversation?" I shook my head, feeling tears burn my eyes. "Your Honor," Claire's lawyer interjected, "the child is clearly suffering from trauma-induced delusions. My client has already arranged for therapeutic support." The judge reviewed the stack of documents, Dr. Brennan's notes, the police report, statements from concerned neighbors. After what felt like hours, he granted Claire temporary custody for 90 days. He mentioned Claire's excellent reputation from her charity work as a factor in his decision. The next day, my teacher, Ms. Martinez, called the house asking about my absences. Claire took the call in front of me. "Yes, I understand your concern," Claire said smoothly. "That's why I'm enrolling her in therapeutic homeschooling. She needs specialized attention right now." When Claire went to shower, I grabbed the house phone and dialed the number from my mom's planner. The private investigator answered on the third ring. "Your mother was right about the life insurance policies," he said after I explained who I was. "I have evidence, but I need $5,000 to release it. Your aunt has some powerful lawyers." Claire's voice echoed from upstairs. The shower had stopped. I hung up quickly. Over the next few days, Claire showed me printed copies of every email I sent, every text I received. "It's for your safety during this vulnerable time," she explained. The printer history showed she'd been monitoring my communications since before my parents died. A woman arrived the next morning introduced as my educational consultant, but I recognized the medical scrubs under her jacket. She was a home health aide, there to report on everything I did. Jake tried to visit that afternoon, but Claire intercepted him at the door. I heard her threaten to report his underage drinking to college scouts if he contacted me again. He left without arguing. Late that night, I snuck into Claire's office and used her own laptop to email the private investigator, agreeing to wire money from my savings. Her browser history was still open. She'd been searching yacht rentals for 3 months before my parents died. The next morning, the bank called about unusual activity on my account. Claire had already frozen it as a protective measure. In frustration, I grabbed her laptop and smashed it against the wall. The screen shattered into 1,000 pieces. Claire walked in just as the laptop hit the ground. Instead of anger, she smiled. "I'll need to document this violent behavior for the permanent guardianship filing." The next evening, a man arrived at the house carrying a medical bag. Claire introduced him as Marcus, her grief support partner who would be moving in to help monitor my safety. He had broad shoulders and cold eyes that tracked my every movement. While Claire showed him around, I noticed the small locked bag he kept close to his side. Marcus settled into the guest room down the hall from mine. That first night, I heard him walking the hallways at regular intervals, his footsteps pausing outside my door every hour. The pattern continued through the night, making real sleep impossible. I woke the next morning feeling groggy and disoriented. 12 hours had somehow passed, though I only remembered fragments. Claire sat at my bedside, explaining that I'd had a severe breakdown requiring sedation for my own safety. The security footage she showed me was disturbing. I appeared to be talking to invisible people, pulling at my hair, trying to climb out windows, but I had no memory of any of it. Over the following days, workers installed security cameras throughout the house. Claire explained they were for my protection, casually mentioning she could monitor the feeds remotely from her phone. The cameras covered every angle, hallways, living spaces, even outside my bedroom and bathroom doors. Privacy became a distant memory. Mrs. Johnson visited with her famous coffee cake, expressing concern about my well-being. Claire thanked her warmly, then pulled out her tablet to show edited security footage. The video showed me pacing my room, having animated conversations with empty air. Mrs. Johnson's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. She left quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. While organizing my mother's jewelry box, searching for anything that might help, my fingers found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small recording device. My hands shook as I discovered audio files dated weeks before the yacht trip. The recordings captured Claire discussing the trust problem with Marcus, but static corrupted half the files, making them legally worthless. Desperation drove me to steal Claire's car keys while she napped. I knew this action would be used against me in court, but I had to reach the police station. My fingers touched the same keys my mother had held just weeks ago. The weight of them felt significant. The detective at the station listened carefully to my story. He reviewed the partial recordings with genuine interest, but explained they were insufficient without corroborating evidence. He suggested finding a lawyer immediately, though we both knew Claire had already poisoned that well. Returning home, I found Emma's parents waiting in the living room. They'd come for what Claire called an intervention about my delusions. Claire had been calling everyone, spreading her narrative of my mental deterioration. I tried explaining the truth about Claire's confession, but my desperate shouting only reinforced their perception of my instability. Claire calmly documented my outburst on her phone while Emma's parents exchanged pitying looks. Only Emma, dragged along reluctantly, caught my eye. She mouthed, "I believe you," while her parents pulled her toward the door. Claire filed for expedited permanent guardianship, citing my escalating mental health crisis. The hearing was scheduled in just 30 days. Dr. Brennan increased our sessions to daily, meticulously documenting what he called my fixation on conspiracy theories. During one session, he showed me a brochure for a residential treatment center. My name was already filled in on the admission forms. My childhood friend Sophia had become a paralegal since we'd last spoken. She visited secretly while Claire attended a charity gala, bringing guardianship law books with highlighted passages about challenging proceedings. We huddled in my room, whispering about legal strategies and evidence requirements. Her presence felt like a lifeline in an ocean of isolation. Claire returned early, finding Sophia in my room. Her face remained calm, but her voice carried steel as she threatened to report Sophia to the Bar Association for practicing without a license. Sophia gathered her books quickly, shooting me an apologetic look before Claire escorted her out. That night, I photographed pages from Claire's day planner showing a meeting with Marcus at the marina the morning my parents died. The evidence felt solid, finally something concrete, but I'd underestimated Claire's thoroughness. The private investigator contacted me through Sophia with shocking news. He discovered Claire had taken out life insurance policies on my parents 2 years ago. The policies specifically required accidental death for full payout. This was the smoking gun I needed. Claire appeared in my doorway the next morning, holding printed emails between my mother and the investigator. She knew everything. The emails discussed Claire's mental instability and my parents' plans to cut her off financially. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, she countered with something stronger. She'd been planning this for years, not months. She showed me my own baby book where she'd made notes about inheritance plans from when I was born. Jake's father initially agreed to help after Jake begged him to intervene. As a lawyer, he could have made a difference. But Claire visited his office with a folder labeled with his name, mentioning his tax evasion casually. He withdrew his offer immediately. The family lawyer finally returned from vacation, but Claire had that covered too. She produced power of attorney documents with my parents' signatures. I knew they were forged, but proving it would take time I didn't have. Breaking into Claire's filing cabinet required waiting until both she and Marcus left the house. I photographed everything. Forged signatures compared to real ones, financial documents, correspondence. Finally, I had concrete evidence of her deception. The relief felt overwhelming. At the public library, I uploaded everything to cloud storage, creating multiple backups across different accounts. The security camera caught me looking over my shoulder repeatedly, paranoid about being discovered. My paranoia proved justified when Claire arrived with Marcus, having tracked me through my phone's location. They escorted me out while the librarian watched helplessly, unable to intervene. Marcus replaced them the home health aide, becoming my full-time monitor. During meal preparation, he mentioned his background managing difficult patients in psychiatric facilities. The threat was clear. Every meal he prepared, I wondered what might be mixed in. Emma climbed through my window one night, tears streaming down her face. Her parents were divorcing, she explained, largely due to disagreements about my situation. Her father believed me, but her mother sided with Claire. We created a plan for Emma to get evidence to her father, but Marcus discovered us. He sedated me quickly while Emma hid in the closet, barely escaping when he left to get Claire. The next morning, Claire filed a police report about the break-in, obtaining a restraining order against Emma. Another ally lost, another wall built around me. The permanent guardianship hearing loomed with no legal representation. The court-appointed lawyer hadn't even attempted to meet me. Hunger strike seemed like my only option. After 3 days without eating Claire's food, Marcus held me down while force-feeding me. Claire documented what she called my eating disorder, adding another symptom to my supposed mental illness. During the struggle, Claire finally revealed her motivation. Her gambling debts would destroy her without my parents' money. They'd offered rehab, but refused financial help. She'd spent their millions in her mind long before taking their lives. The antipsychotics Claire had been giving me made planning difficult, but I calculated the exact dose needed for hospitalization without permanent damage. The OD brought paramedics and temporary freedom from the house. In the hospital, I told nurses about the forced medication, but Claire arrived with documentation portraying me as attention-seeking and self-harming. She used the incident to request emergency guardianship, claiming I was a danger to myself. The legal system moved faster when safety was involved. Sophia visited disguised as a candy striper, bringing news that the private investigator would testify if someone paid his fee. He'd been receiving threatening calls about his license. Madison, the same girl who'd mocked Sarah's secondhand clothes, became my unlikely hope. I approached her with my story, begging for help. She agreed to pay the investigator, but only if I publicly admitted my parents were poverty-obsessed weirdos who caused their own deaths. The betrayal of their memory burned, but I agreed. I had to choose between their values and their justice. The judge moved the hearing up due to the medical emergency. 72 hours to build a case from a hospital bed felt impossible. Claire's lawyer golfed with the judge, another connection in her web of influence. The realization of Claire's true goal hit me during a medication fog. She needed me alive but incapacitated until age 25 when the trust fully matured. Then she could inherit as my guardian. The medications weren't just controlling me, they were slowly poisoning my mind. Cognitive decline over time would leave me unable to challenge her. I convinced a skeptical toxicologist to test my hair samples by showing him photos of my dead parents, manipulating his sympathy about his own daughter. The test would prove long-term drugging. Pretending the medications were working, I acted compliant around Marcus. He relaxed enough to admit details about the drugging, while I secretly recorded on a phone Emma had hidden during her visit. The evidence was building, but so were the obstacles. A hospital social worker finally took notice after seeing bruises from the force feeding. She began an independent investigation, offering hope. But Claire arrived with discharge papers and legal documents granting her medical decision-making power. The papers were dated before my parents' death. More evidence of premeditation, but also more proof of her thoroughness. During transport home, I grabbed the steering wheel, causing a minor accident. Marcus hit his head on the window, requiring hospital treatment. I ran from the scene, arriving at the police station bloodied and desperate. My appearance perfectly matched the mentally ill narrative Claire had crafted. The detective from before took me seriously, but Claire's lawyers arrived with involuntary commitment papers signed by 2 doctors. One was Marcus's medical school roommate, another connection in Claire's network. Emma's father, now separated from his wife, offered limited legal help. His resources were strained from divorce proceedings that Claire had helped instigate by feeding his wife doubts about me. The private investigator finally came forward but revealed he'd been playing both sides. Claire had hired him first to investigate my parents. His evidence could help either party depending on who paid more. Trust became impossible when everyone had a price. While Marcus was sedated in the hospital, I used his phone to access Claire's cloud storage. The password was my parents' anniversary date, a cruel touch. Inside were yacht rental agreements and a manifesto about how wealthy people who don't share with family deserve consequences. The files revealed something worse. Claire had tested the sedatives on my grandmother first. Her heart attack 2 years ago wasn't natural at all. I remembered complaining about grandmother's will at dinner once, how she'd left everything to charity. My own words had given Claire the idea to start with her. I studied the original will more carefully. If both my parents and I died, everything would go to charity. Claire needed me alive but incapacitated to inherit as my guardian. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. To protect the evidence until the hearing, I wrapped the USB drive in plastic and swallowed it. The hospital x-ray would find it, but I hoped the court would demand it first. My stomach churned at the thought, but I had no other options. I called Sophia from a hospital payphone, asking her to file an emergency injunction about medical abuse. It would trigger a mandatory psychological evaluation that could go either way. Sophia agreed, despite knowing it might cost her paralegal certification for overstepping boundaries. The next morning, Claire's trap sprang perfectly. She arrived with printouts of my browsing history, showing searches about faking mental illness and inheritance law. The timestamp showed I'd made these searches while supposedly sedated. She'd been using my devices while I was unconscious. Every ally who'd helped me faced immediate retaliation. Emma's family was under investigation for tax irregularities. Sophia lost her job after an anonymous complaint. The private investigator's license was suspended pending review. Claire had prepared leverage against everyone for years. The hospital social worker who'd started helping me was suddenly transferred to another facility after an administrative complaint. My last medical advocate vanished overnight. Tomorrow was the guardianship hearing, and I had evidence but no credibility, allies but no power, truth but no voice. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in the outfit Claire selected, conservative and childlike, designed to make me look vulnerable and unstable. We arrived at the family courthouse where my parents had been married 20 years ago. Their wedding photos still hung on the wall near the clerk's office. The courtroom filled with people testifying against me. Former friends described my concerning behavior, while Claire maintained perfect composure. She destroyed lives to reach this moment, but her mask never slipped. Claire's lawyer presented evidence of my deteriorating mental state. The sewer slide attempt that was actually my calculated OD, the violence of smashing her laptop, the theft of her car. Each action I'd taken to save myself became proof of my instability. When my turn came to present evidence, Claire's lawyer mentioned they had video of my sewer slide attempt ready to play if I continued fighting. The threat was clear: accept defeat or be humiliated further. Suddenly, the fire alarm blared through the courthouse. Everyone evacuated in controlled chaos. In the confusion, I pressed the USB drive into the court clerk's hand, whispering urgently about the evidence it contained. Through the glass doors, I saw Emma pulling away from the fire alarm, her father waiting to take the blame. Court reconvened 20 minutes later. The clerk mentioned receiving evidence during the evacuation, but Claire's lawyer immediately objected to its admissibility. The judge agreed to review it privately during recess. When we returned, the judge's expression had changed. The USB contained yacht rental contracts, showing Claire had rented the same boat 6 times for practice runs before my parents' final trip. Receipts for sedatives matched every practice date. She'd rehearsed their murders like a performance. Claire's lawyer argued that evidence was obtained illegally, and my mental state made me an unreliable witness. He produced expert testimony about false memories and trauma victims. The case hung in delicate balance. The judge offered a compromise. I would get an independent guardian, but I'd have to undergo 6 months of psychiatric treatment. If I refused, Claire would get permanent guardianship immediately. The choice was mine: accept limited freedom with Claire exposed, or fight and risk losing everything. I thought of my father's favorite phrase: sometimes you win by not losing everything. With shaking hands, I signed the agreement using the pen my mother had given me for my 16th birthday, the one thing Claire hadn't taken. Claire was charged with fraud but not murder. Without bodies or direct evidence of the killings, prosecutors couldn't prove homicide. She received 5 years in minimum security prison, eligible for parole in 2. Her gambling debts would follow her out. The court appointed Catherine Chen as my guardian, a social worker who specialized in cases like mine. She controlled my finances until I turned 21, but she also protected me from Claire's remaining influence. My relationships with friends were permanently damaged. Emma's family blamed me for their divorce. Jake couldn't look at me without seeing the girl who'd almost destroyed his father. I moved into supervised housing near the courthouse, sharing a small apartment with 2 other wards of the state. 3 times a week, I attended mandatory therapy sessions where I actually began processing my grief. The therapist was Dr. Brennan's former colleague, but she seemed genuinely interested in helping. 6 months later, the private investigator sent me his final report through Catherine. My parents had known Claire was dangerous, but kept her close to monitor her. They'd been building a case against against her while pretending to trust her. Their love and paranoia had been intertwined, each feeding the other until it destroyed them. The report included one last revelation. Claire had been embezzling from my father's company for years, using her gambling losses as cover. My parents discovered it weeks before they died. They planned to confront her after the yacht trip, wanting one last family moment before cutting her off forever. I visited their graves on a gray Tuesday morning, exactly 2 years after they died. A service dog named Bailey walked beside me, trained to detect anxiety attacks before they started. The therapy program had matched us 6 months ago. Standing at their headstones, I finally understood the price of survival. Claire's greatest cruelty wasn't cowling them, it was making me become someone they'd barely recognize. Someone who betrayed their memory to Madison, who sacrificed others to save herself, who learned to think like Claire to defeat her. The inheritance would be mine in 3 years, but it felt like blood money now. Yep, I'd won by not losing everything, just like my father taught me. But the cost of that victory would follow me forever. Some nights I still heard Claire's voice in my head, reminding me that we weren't so different after all. Bailey pressed against my leg, sensing my distress. I bent down to pet her, grounding myself in the present. Tomorrow I'd have another therapy session, another supervised day, another step toward a future my parents would never see. But today, I just stood there with my dog, carrying both my inheritance and the weight of how I'd claimed it.